Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CP Lab Safety Speaker Series. I'm incredibly honored to be introducing our speaker today, Dr. James Kaufman, founder of Lab Safety Institute, and he did his graduate work at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. One of the work that I'm very interested to learn more about at some point in the future is the postdoctoral work that Jim did, converting garbage to biofuel. But today's talk is about lab safety, and I'm going to let Jim introduce himself. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you very much for this invitation to join all of you today to talk a little bit about one of my favorite subjects. How do we convince others to care more about lab safety, to take it more seriously, to understand that it's really important? And on behalf of my colleague, Dr. Rajiv Sinthapa, who is our president, and myself, as Ron said, founder and now president emeritus, we're very grateful to be here with you and grateful to CP Lab Safety and their wonderful EcoFunnels for making this opportunity possible. Lab Safety Institute is a nonprofit for safety in science and science education. Over the last 45 years, we've educated over 100,000 people, scientists and science educators, in more than 30 countries around the world, and 150 different kinds of laboratories. I hope you'll take out a blank sheet of paper and write on the top action ideas, because I'm going to suggest a dozen or more things that I'd like you all to remember and think about doing for improving a lab safety program. This isn't a sprint. This is a marathon. And I love to think about that stonecutter hammering away at the rock, hitting it 100 times without so much as a crack showing. And then on the 101st blow, it splits in two. And we know it wasn't just that hit, but everything that had gone before. And the message is, if you'd like to improve your lab safety program, you've got to be in for the long haul and work hard at it. Why do we have this difficulty? Why are we in this situation where people don't seem to care enough about it? Well, it's called the cycle of ignorance, and it begins in elementary and secondary schools where we don't teach safety. And so the students, they don't learn about safety, and they don't develop the safety ethic, and then they graduate without the safety ethic or the safety knowledge and become the teachers, and the cycle is completed. I went to school for 25 years. Undergraduate, high school, graduate school, 25 years. When I left and I went to work for the Dow Chemical Company, I learned more about safety in one day than I had in 25 years in school. And it scared the living daylights out of me. And that's where I began to get really interested in lab safety, because I'd only been at work two weeks when I cleared the building, when I had a problem in the hood I was working at. And 2 weeks later, a graduate student at WPI blew off parts of both hands doing 6 things that I'd learned at Dow you just don't do. And as I drove back there and looked around the room at the lights that had been blown off the ceiling, at the windows that were gone, and the bench that had been sheared off like somebody had taken a hot knife through butter, and a grad student badly injured, I realized my 25 years in school hadn't prepared me to work safely. So at Dow, I wrote something called the Laboratory Safety Guidelines, 40 suggestions for a safer lab. We've given away 6 million copies, and it's available in 23 languages. Anybody who'd like a copy is welcome to have one. They're on our website, and we're happy to send them out to folks. So let's see how you're doing with your safety program. Here's a simple scale developed by Sullivan and Kroll If you don't have a safety program and people treat it with disdain, well, that's 0 points. 1 point if you react to accidents and maybe just go on to blame someone and then go back to work and ignore the rest. 2 points if you have rules, policies, and regulations. But if they're not in writing, you don't have rules and policies and regulations. You have an oral tradition. And if you don't enforce them, you have lip service. 3 points if you do pre-startup analysis. 4 points if you track both leading and lagging indicators. Lagging, after an accident has happened, how many lost time accidents did we have last year? That's a lagging indicator. Leading indicator, safety committee meetings, lab inspections, reviews of chemical hygiene plans, all the things we do in advance to make it less likely. And 5 points if it's a core value, if it's part of our Constitution. American Chemical Society did that a few years ago, and they said, you can't get an award from the American Chemical Society without having your safety performance considered. And they said, you can't publish an article in our journal unless you include the safety information associated with the research that you did. Make it a core value. So whether you're starting from scratch, and I meet many organizations that are, or you have a highly developed and very effective program, our goal is to help you continue to improve it. And even if it's best, I'm going to make suggestions that can make it even better, outstanding. We want to have an effective lab safety program, and there are critical elements. What do we mean by a lab safety program? Well, our definition is a planned group of activities, functions, and practices which occur regularly to address your health and safety needs. Here's a checklist. It has 33 elements on it for a good lab safety program. Those are the first 20. Here's another dozen. Do you see anything on that list that doesn't make sense to you? If not, please just let me know and I'll be happy to explain it in greater detail. You can use this list either qualitatively or quantitatively to evaluate your lab safety program. Qualitatively, just put a check mark in the column. Okay, if everything's okay. Needs additional work, if it does. And if it doesn't exist, put a check mark in the third column. If you'd like to be semi-quantitative, fine. Count up how many check marks you have in each column and see what the totals are. Your goal is to have 33 in the okay column. Now, if you're a quantitative person and you'd like a score out of 100, give yourself 3 points for everything that's okay. And since there are 33, that's 99. And I'll give you a bonus point for having the courage to do this quantitatively. 0 to 3 if it needs additional work, and 0 if it does not exist. You can add them all up and see how you're doing. And of course, we do have a publication called Audits and Inspections that has the criteria for all of these. Let's take a trip to the Middle East and look at some of the problems that we encounter when we look at laboratories. Here's a flammables cabinet. And as I looked at this cabinet, I noticed that on the side of the cabinet, there was something hanging there. And I said to the folks I was with, what is that? And they explained it to me. I wonder how many of you recognize and understand what that is. I said to them, what else does it do? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, this could be a language issue. So I'll say it differently. I said, what is its second purpose? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I guess it's not language. It's probably knowledge. So I explained its second purpose. And then I came back to the United States and I went to Cornell University, and I went to Ohio Wesleyan, and I went to Green River College, and I went to MIT. And I asked 100 people, what is this and what's its second purpose? And only 50% of the people knew that this is used to hold the door open. You put it over that post and it holds the door open because this is a spring-loaded cabinet. The doors shut automatically, and it's often difficult to get stuff out of the cabinet because you have to put your leg against it and then back into the door and pivot like a quarterback taking a snap out of center to get the container out. And if the fire breaks out while you're on the other side of the room, this door is supposed to close automatically, because the second purpose here, which no one understood, is that this is called a fusible link, and it's designed to melt at 165 degrees centigrade. Well, in this company, it broke. So they machined this one out of aluminum because they didn't understand what it was or why it was there. And this melts at 650 degrees centigrade, and the fire will be rampant by the time the doors close. You see, life is full of choices, but you're not free to choose unless you know what the choices are. There are 3 C's of safety. And the first C is the word choices. Lucy says life is full of choices. You know Lucy, right? She's in Peanuts. And she explains to Linus, who's got that snowball, that life is full of choices. And she says, you can choose to throw it at me, or you can choose not to throw it at me. Life is full of choices. And at the bottom it says, the only persons free to choose are those who know the choices. But choices have consequences. And she explains them. She says, if you throw it, I'm going to pound you right into the ground. And if you don't, your head is going to be spared. And it takes him about a nanosecond. And he says, life is full of choices, but you never get any. And he throws it down to the ground. Well, the person's best prepared to choose will know the likely outcomes. When I visit those labs, I find these fusible links in a plastic bag sitting on top of the cabinet, inside, missing, broken, and people don't understand how to use them or why they're there. Here's a rotary evaporator. I had a call from John Rikas from the Maryland Department of Labor, and he said, Jim, what do you think about this? A young man, 25 years old, is using a rotary evaporator. And in the flask, he has a reactive material, and he knows that. So he puts a shield in front of the rotating flask. But when he goes to take the flask off the rotary evaporator, he pushes the shield out of the way. And at that instant, the contents of the flask explode, and the glass fragments slit his throat and killed him. 25 years old, Elkton, Maryland, Dennis Park is dead, and he leaves behind an 8-month-old child and a spouse. And John Rikas says, what do you think? And I said, I think he wasn't wearing a face shield. And you know what? He wasn't. And it wasn't the money, because the face shield was in the room no farther from him than that door is. The door to your room is to you. It was a choice, bad choice. It had consequences, horrible consequences. And the third C word is really a twofer. 2 C's for the price of 1. And we're back to our theme. What does it take to convince people to care? Maybe some of you recognize that young lady in the picture. Her name is Michelle Dufault. And in 2011, Michelle was a senior physics astronomy major at Yale University. She was working alone in a chemistry department machine shop at 2 in the morning with long hair, not tied back. She got it caught in a lathe and she was killed. There have been hundreds of lab fatalities. There's now a foundation called the Default Foundation, and they've been providing us grants to support safety in science education. Do we have to have people die? On our website, you can view the memorial wall. You can view the memorial wall with more than 600 accounts of laboratory fatalities. How do we convince people to care? Well, there are critical components that we would like to talk about that I'd like to share with you. The new employee orientation, the manual, the safety committee, the rules agreement, 4 simple questions, and a bonus, policy statements. These numbers, 18, 30, 28, 20, they are from that checklist that I showed you. And we're going to talk about what I consider to be the most important parts of a lab safety program. Let's start with the new employee safety orientation. When I started working for the Dow Chemical Company, my boss, Don Dix, spent the entire first day doing nothing but talking about safety. How long have you been working for your current employer? What role did your immediate supervisor play in your safety orientation? What HR does and what the safety department do is good. That's great. But it's not a substitute for, on day one, having your immediate supervisor sit down and talk with you about the importance of safety. Imagine HR and the safety department get done, and then you go to your boss who says, "Oh, Jim, I'm so glad you're here. We've got 600 samples in that room, and if we don't get them analyzed by Friday, we're in big trouble. So if you have to come in and work alone at night, that's okay." What's just happened? Your supervisor just cut the legs out from underneath the lab safety program, because getting data is more important than your health and safety. So we really want that immediate supervisor to be involved. We want them to have a carbonless 4-part checklist that they can use with all the items on it that this new person should know. And an easy way to do this, and here's an action idea for you, give out a blank sheet of paper at your next staff meeting and ask your colleagues, what are the 10 most important things about lab safety that a new person should know coming to work with us here? Gather them together, say thank you, and build your David Letterman top however many list, rank ordered. Pull off the top the conference all-stars, the ones that everybody agrees are the most important, and give one to each of the members of your department. And every month from now on, one of them has to talk about the content, or at the next staff meeting, go through a dozen of them. What is the content? And what has just happened? Well, the supervisor didn't tell them what was important. They told the supervisor. And the supervisor didn't train them. They just trained the supervisor on the content. And at every meeting, everybody gets involved in safety. The new employee, with that 4-part form, they sign it, date it, and the employee gets a copy. The supervisor keeps a copy. One copy goes to HR so they can track this as a leading indicator. And one copy goes to the supervisor's supervisor up the food chain so that the supervisor can meet with the new employee within a week and emphasize the importance of safety. I've asked over 100,000 people about the supervisor and day one, and only 5% say their supervisor talked about lab safety with them. You don't have to wait. Let's put it into the interview. Here's another action idea for you. I had a meeting with the chemistry department chairs from the Southeast United States, and I asked them, how many of you interview candidates who would like a job in your department? And all of them put their hands up, of the 50 people. And I said, how many of you have ever asked a candidate the lab safety question? And they looked at each other and they looked at me and they said, what's the lab safety question? I said, what have you done in the past that's going to allow you to contribute to our department's lab safety program? Guess how many out of 50 had ever asked a job candidate for their department the lab safety question? That's right, 0, not 1, 0. Now, after today, if you hire people who don't happen to care about lab safety, think about having missed an opportunity at the interview. Just to stop for a second, I noticed as I was looking at your website that you have a little rat that shows up periodically. This is LSI's squeaky rat, and it says on it, lab safety rat. We don't give a rat's rear for safety, we give the whole rat. Congratulations, you've just been ratted on for working safely. Now it's your turn to rat on someone else. There's one more place where you can inject safety before the employee even starts, and that's in the classified ad that you run somewhere. Online, however you advertise, add 2 words, safety conscious. Wanted, safety conscious analytical chemist. Wanted, safety conscious microbiologist. And put it in the job description and put it in the job performance review. At Dow, there were 10 items on the job performance review, and safety performance was one of them. Guess where it was on the list? Number 1 at the top of the list. My boss at Dow handed me the Dow Central Research Safety Manual. And he said, Jim, we've written down all the policies and procedures that we want to have followed. So please take this home tonight and read it so that when you come back tomorrow morning, you can ask any questions you like, because this is how we want you to do things here. This manual has to be readily accessible, easy to get at, easy to read, and the policies do need to be in writing, and it should be reviewed at least annually. And this is in addition to having your chemical hygiene plan, because the chemical hygiene plan focuses on, that's right, chemicals. But the lab safety manual covers all 9 of life's hazards: chemical, physical, biological, mechanical, noise, radiation, high-low pressure, electrical, stress. Life's 9 hazards. And every lab should have a good lab safety manual. And the policies, of course, they need to be enforced, because if they're not enforced, you don't have policies. What you have is called lip service. And it doesn't take folks very long to figure out that there are no consequences for not following the rules. And then folks often do what they like. Kind of the Frank Sinatra method. I did it my way. We're talking about having rules. And what rules are really monuments that we erect over the dead and crippled bodies of people who figured out a way to do something and it didn't quite go right, and they're either badly injured or no longer with us. We have a collection of over 5,000 examples of laboratory accidents, and we published some of them in a collection called Learning by Accident and 100 Years of Progress. We need to learn from these. I had a colleague who liked them so much that she pinned them up in the elevator at her university. And there were these accident accounts in the elevator, and people began asking her when she was going to change these. These stories about accidents capture people's imagination. My boss said, Jim, if there's anything that you'd like to do that's not in the manual, don't do it. Take your suggestion to the safety committee. And if they approve it, they'll put it in the manual and we'll all do it that way. How does the safety committee work at your place? Does it meet regularly? Is it for the labs? Is there a lab safety committee? Is there a rotating membership? If you had, say, 30 people working in your lab, I would say take 6 of those people and have them be on the committee, and have 6 other people who are going to be the alternates. You serve for a year. If for some reason you can't attend the monthly meeting, the alternate goes, stands in for you. After the first year, every 2 months, in this example, one person goes off the committee, an alternate takes over, and a new alternate is appointed. So over a period of 5 years, 5 times 6 is 30, all the folks that work in the lab, including the lab director and management for the lab, will serve on the committee. Everybody gets involved. This is one of the best ways to build a culture of safety. There is something called a central safety committee model. And this is something that DuPont developed, where the senior president, most senior person, and their direct reports they get together usually every week to talk about how things are going, but once a month they put on their hard hats and they become the central safety committee. And they talk about the safety issues at their level. How's the safety committee working at your place? Number 4 is a rules agreement. My boss at Dow said, Jim, tomorrow when you come back, day 2, I'd like you to sign the safety manual in the front where it says, I've read it, I understand it, and I agree to follow these procedures. And I wasn't a sophomore in high school. I wasn't a sophomore in college. I was a PhD with 2 years of postdoctoral experience signing a rules agreement. This should be signed by students at academic institutions. And if any of you have children in school, or you recall your years in school as in high school or college, you probably signed a rules agreement when you were there. What I've learned is that there was a missing part at Dow, and that part is number 4, the realize. I've read it, I understand it, I agree to follow it, and I realize that if I don't follow the rules, it can cost me the privilege of being here. That working safely is a condition of learning and working. It would be good to provide a cover letter from the highest ranking person you can find who would write that cover letter, and we have samples of it, welcoming people to the organization, pointing out that there are hazards and that there are rules that need to be followed and that there are consequences for not following the rules. At San Juan College in Farmington, New Mexico, they took our sample letter, and their president and their dean revised it slightly, and they pinned it up on the wall in all of their science classes, welcoming the students, pointing out that there can be hazards there, and they need to follow the rules, and if the rules are not followed, these are the discipline procedures that they have that they are going to use. If you've got a rules agreement at your place and you haven't looked at it in a long time, because you may have signed it many years ago, take it out and renew your vows. If you don't have a rules agreement, think about giving out another blank sheet of paper to everyone and asking your colleagues at a staff meeting, what are the 10 most important rules that everybody should follow? In fact, if a colleague didn't want to follow one of those rules, you wouldn't want to work in the same room with them because they're putting themselves at risk, they're putting others at risk, and they're putting the reputation of the organization at risk. Gather them together, rank order them, take off the top 10 or 15 or 20 rules, and use that as your starting point for a rules agreement for your organization. Number 5 is 4 big questions. And they're pretty simple. Sometimes we call them the 4 simple questions. And these are the questions that we'd like everyone to be able to answer before they go ahead and try something in the lab. What are the hazards? Can you recognize them? Do you know what they are? Have you thought about what could possibly go wrong? Is it a fire? Is it a spill? Is it a medical emergency? How are you going to deal with them? Do you know the answer to what I call the Kenny Rogers question? Remember Kenny Rogers and his song, The Gambler? You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. Sometimes dealing with them means leaving and getting everybody out so nobody gets hurt. And what are the prudent practices, protective facilities, and personal protective equipment necessary to minimize the risk? If you can answer these 4 questions, then you're ready to go ahead. At Dow, we had to prepare what was called a safe operating package before doing an experiment. What are the reactions? What could go wrong? What are the products going to be? How are we going to deal with these things? And we had to have it reviewed by 2 supervisors, and 1 copy was posted on the hood and 1 copy was in the front office in case we needed to, not in case we couldn't get to the hood. The final component is the policy statement. That's the number 6 for today. This is a statement that's signed by the highest ranking person you can find in your organization, dated and prominently displayed. This is a sample for the company. It's the responsibility of our company and its employees to ensure that our business activities protect and promote the health and safety of our employees, our customers, and the environment. Signed, dated, prominently displayed. And there are versions of this for K through 12 schools and academic institutions. The thought is the same. At the Cabot Corporation, in their lobby, this statement of their safety commitment is a 2-foot by 3-foot poster that's signed by the president and the EHS director. Very prominent, easy for anybody coming in to see and be aware of this policy. I worked for a company in Pasadena, Texas called Basell. It was a joint venture of BASF and Shell Chemical, Basell, now owned by Lyondell, I believe. It was a polyolefins company, and their policy was framed, and the mat around it was very large, and there was enough room for everyone who worked in the lab to sign on this policy statement their personal commitment to the organization's policy. We want everybody to be committed to a safer and healthier environment. It takes a lot of things to have an effective safety program. Number 1, it takes caring about yourself and others. I think that's why my boss at Dow spent the whole first day doing nothing but talking about safety. It has to be integral. It can't be something extra. It's just going to be part of doing the job right. When I had that incident at Dow, the next day we had a staff meeting and 50 of us were in the room, and the boss walked up to me, the lab director, and he said, "We want to thank Dr. Kaufman for his display of pyrotechnics, but we want him to save this for the 4th of July. Thank you." Then he said, "Look, we pay you to do 3 things here. Number 1, work safely. Number 2, do your research. Number 3, write your reports and patent disclosures." And working safely wasn't separate over here from the other 2. It was all together. It was one of the primary colors. It was integral, just part of doing the job right. We need to have rewards. We need to have rewards for good safety performance. And the simplest, least expensive reward that you can give an employee that doesn't require a purchase order or a requisition is to say thank you. Thank you for paying attention to safety. But you'll notice that that carrot is hanging on a stick. And that stick is the discipline. When all the mentoring and all the coaching doesn't seem to work, and Jim doesn't seem to get it, then we need to have a discipline procedure in place as our corrective action. And working safely must be a condition of employment. Number 4 is repetition. We all get careless, we all get forgetful, we all need reminders from time to time. And getting together like this for a presentation, an online video, a training program, these are all things that help to reinforce. And having a good lab safety bulletin board where you post all kinds of important lab safety information, like off-the-job safety, accident information, emergency procedure of the month, safety data sheet of the month, safety vocabulary. All of these things are good reminders, and it's good to have a lab safety bulletin board. And participation. There's no magic to safety. It's not like pulling rabbits out of hats to get students and faculty and administrators involved. What about employees? Yep, we can get employees and management involved too. There's no magic to it, but there are 4 magic words. I need your help. And we need to turn to our colleagues and get them to participate with some of the different kinds of activities that I've been suggesting today. This is a big challenge, but it's worth it because no lesson is so important and no task so urgent that we can't take time to teach, learn, and practice science safely. Thank you all very much. Appreciate this opportunity. And thank you again to CP Lab Safety. I'm Jim Kaufman. Please call anytime you'd like assistance.
So Jim, it's important to note that all of your DVDs are now available through CP Lab Safety. So anybody who's listening to this presentation on YouTube or on CP Lab Safety website should know that they can contact CP Lab Safety and arrange for your virtual tours or arrange for getting videos, etc., etc. Thank you so much again. Let's one more round of applause.
Well, thank you all for inviting us to do this. This is a privilege for us, and look forward to working with you. And I see you had a little place on your website for science jokes.
Yes.
Do you know what the formula HIJKLMNO is? The compound?
Water.
HIJKLMNO.
No.
What is that?
H2O.
Is it?
Yes. HIJKL.
H2O. It's the it's the alphabet from H2O.
Oh.
Get it.
Michelle got it.
H2O.
Thank you, Jim.
No,
One more
thank you.
time.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim.
Ron,
We're
thank
gonna-
you very
we're gonna-
much. Appreciate it. I hope you all have a good day.